you may say, we asked you to speak about women and fiction. What has that got to do with a room of one's own? I will try to explain. When you asked me to speak about women and fiction, I sat down on the banks of a river and began to wonder what the words meant. I soon saw that I should never be able to come to a conclusion. I should never be able to fulfill what is, I understand, the first duty of a lecturer, to hand you, after an hour's discourse, a nugget of pure truth to wrap up between the pages of your notebooks. All I could do was offer you an opinion upon one minor point. A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction. And that, as you will see, leaves a great problem of the true nature of woman and the true nature of fiction unsolved. But in order to make amends, I'm going to do what I can to show you how I arrived at this opinion about the room and the money. I sat down by the banks of a river a week or two ago in fine October weather, lost in thought. Thought, to call it by a prouder name than it deserved, had let its line down into the stream. It swayed minute after minute, letting the water lift it and sink it until, you know the little tug, the sudden conglomeration of an idea at the end of one's line, and the cautious hauling of it in, and the careful laying of it out. Alas, laid on the grass, how small, how insignificant this thought of mine looked. The sort of fish that a good fisherman throws back into the water so that it may grow fatter and one day be worth cooking and eating. But however small it was, it had nevertheless that mysterious property of its kind. Put back into the mind, it became at once very exciting and important, and as it darted hither and thither and flashed and swam, it set up such a tumult of ideas in my head that it was impossible to sit still. It was thus I found myself walking with extreme rapidity across a grass plot. Instantly, a man's figure rose to intercept me. Nor did I at first understand that the gesticulations of a curious-looking object in cutaway coat and evening shirt were aimed at me. His face expressed horror and indignation. Instinct rather than reason came to my help. He was a beadle, a caretaker of that august men's college, which I shall call Oxbridge. I was merely a woman. This was the turf, there was the path. Only fellows and scholars are allowed here. The gravel was the place for me. As I regained the path, the arms of the beadle sank. His face assumed its usual repose. And though turf is better walking than gravel, no very great harm was done. The only charge I could bring against the fellows and scholars was that in protection of their turf, which has been guarded for 300 years in succession, they had sent my little fish into hiding.
I look at trees in the winter in absolute awe. The ones that are not evergreens shed their leaves in the fall without a single objection. They stand truly naked before God and the world. But spring does come, and they are clothed in beautiful arrays of leaves again. Trees are living creations, and thus possess souls. Each year, they endure the cycle of seasons and grow a little older, taller, and wiser. During sometimes harsh elements, they wait and seem to know that better days will come. They stand as monuments of courage and faith to anyone paying attention. I've not always been so courageous, so filled with faith and willing to shed the leaves hiding my most painful secrets before God and the world. I did not do so without objection and resistance the few times circumstances beyond my control forced the revelations. I do so now because it is time. While there were moments of great desperation and turmoil, from a very early age, I never gave up hope that someday a better day would come. I just didn't know what that better day would look like. In my heart, mind, and soul, I believe I have truly acquired the authority to author my own life script. Times are indeed much better, but in order for you to better understand this journey, I suppose it is best to return to the beginning.
But here I was, at the door that actually leads to the library of Oxbridge itself. I must have opened it, for instantly there issued, like a guardian angel with a flutter of black gown instead of white wings, a silver, deprecating, kindly gentleman who regretted in a low voice as he waved me back that ladies are only admitted to the library if accompanied by a fellow of the college or furnished with a letter of introduction. That a famous library has been cursed by a woman is a matter of complete indifference to a famous library. Never will I wake those echoes. Never will I ask for that hospitality again, I vowed as I descended the steps in anger.
Now, there was a time when I trusted you. I could look to you and feel protection. Yet, by your hands, I was shown how far I could be thrown when your whim and your will cared nothing for my own. You were to lead, and I to follow. No wonder I'm a lousy dance partner. With your hand at my back, I'd sit into your arm. With eyes focused and gleaming, I felt the warmth of your charm. The music played, and we swayed, moving this way and that. I felt the love, lived the dream, ignoring the fact of your anger and your hatred, the seething, scornful glaze of your pride and your lies. You led me in a maze, and now I realize that all I thought I knew seemed to blur when I tried to follow you.
We grew up going to North Carolina as a child to visit my grandparents. I loved being around my grandmother because her name was Marie, which is my middle name. My brother and my uncle started molesting me on my visits to see my grandmother. They hurt me really, really bad. As the years have passed by, I finally told my mother what they had done to me. And of course, her response to me wasn't good. Her exact words to me was, "What are you telling me for?" That hurt me to the core of my soul. All I could do was bust out in tears and cry. I walked out of her door. I cried all the way home. Couldn't wait to get there to get high and have a few drinks.
It was impossible not to reflect. The reflection, whatever it was cut short. The clock had struck. It was time to find one's way to luncheon. I will tell you that lunch on this occasion at Oxbridge began with fillet of sole sunk in a deep dish, over which the college cook had spread a blanket of the whitest cream. Partridges came next. But if this suggests a couple of bald brown birds on a plate, you are mistaken. The partridges, many and various, came with all their sauces and salads, the sharp and the sweet, their potatoes thin as coins, but not so hard, their sprouts foliated as rosebuds, but more succulent. And no sooner had the roast and its retinue been done with than the silent serving man set before us, wreathed in napkins, a confection which rose all sugar from the waves. Meanwhile, the wine glasses flushed yellow, flushed crimson, had been emptied, had been filled, and thus by degrees was lit, halfway down the spine, which is the seat of the soul. Not that hard little electric light that we call brilliance, but the more profound, subtle, and subterranean glow, which is the rich yellow flame of rational discourse. No need to hurry, no need to sparkle, no need to be anybody but oneself. We are all going to heaven. In other words, how good life seemed, how sweet its rewards as one sunk among the cushions of the window seat. The lunch party, thanks to the hospitality of the host, had lasted far into the afternoon. The beautiful October day was fading now, and leaves were falling from the trees in the avenue as I walked through it. Gate after gate seemed to close with gentle finality behind me. Innumerable beadles were fitting innumerable keys into well-oiled locks. The treasure house of Oxbridge was being made secure for another night. After the avenue, one comes out upon a road that leads you along to Fernham, the women's college. The gardens of Fernham lay before me now, wild and wind-blown and open. One could certainly have done without dinner after such a luncheon, but dinner was being served in the great dining hall. Here was my soup. It was a plain gravy soup. There was nothing to stir the fancy in that. One could have seen through the transparent liquid any pattern there might have been on the plate itself, but there was no pattern. The plate was plain. Next came beef with its attendant greens and potatoes. A homely trinity, suggesting the rumps of cattle in a muddy market. There was no reason to complain of nature's daily food, seeing that the supply was sufficient and coal miners doubtless were sitting down to less. Prunes and custard followed. And if anyone complains that prunes, even when mitigated by custard, are an uncharitable vegetable, fruit they are not, stringy as a miser's heart, and exuding a fluid such as might run in a miser's veins, we should reflect that there are people whose charity embraces even the prune. Biscuits and cheese came next, and here the water jug was passed liberally round, for it is the nature of biscuits to be dry, and these were biscuits to the core. That was all. The meal was over. Soon the hall was emptied of every sign of food and made ready, no doubt, for breakfast the next morning. And was it for a guest, a stranger, to say, "The meal was not good"? No, one could say nothing of the sort. Indeed, conversation for a moment flagged. The human frame being what it is, heart, body, and brain all mixed together and not contained in separate compartments, a good dinner is of great importance to good talk. The lamp in the spine does not light on beef and prunes. We are all probably going to heaven. That is the dubious and qualifying state of mind that beef and prunes at the end of a day's work breed between them. Briefly then, I told my friend Mary Seaton about the luncheon at Oxbridge, about the wine and the partridges. All of that took place over in that college, I said, but this one, where we are now sitting, what lies beneath the gallant red brick and the wild, unkempt grasses of the garden? What is the force behind the plain china off which we dined, and the beef, the custard, and the prunes? Well, said Mary, about the year 1860. Oh, but you know the story. Rooms were hired, committees met, circulars were drawn up, letters were read out. Lady such and such has promised so much. On the contrary, Mr. Thus and such won't give a penny. The editor of the Saturday Review is being very rude. How can we raise funds to pay for officers? Oh, shall we hold a bazaar? Or can we find a pretty girl to sit on the front row? Let us look up what John Stuart Mill said on the subject. Could we get the editor of such and such to print a letter? Or could we get Lady Thus-and-so to sign it? Lady Thus-and-so's out of town. Well, that's the way it was done, presumably. And it was a prodigious effort. It was only after a long struggle and with the utmost difficulty that they got £30,000 together. So obviously, said Mary, the amenities will have to wait. We cannot have sofas and separate rooms, wine and partridges. At the thought of all those women working year after year and finding it as much as they could do to raise £30,000, we burst out in scorn at the reprehensible poverty of our sex. What had our mothers been doing then, that they had no wealth to leave us?
Had I erected a home, perhaps then you'd think I'd have earned your respect. To supply the edifice, furnished and bedecked with satins and silks, blankets and quilts, fine wines and foods to dine. Books from ceiling to floor. Fragrances, full, sweet, subtle, and more. Forgive me, for I have nothing left. I spent it all to build wall after wall, and a roof to boot. I broke my back for the basics we lacked, and now you say that's not enough? Where's the glitz, the glam, the glory, the stuff? Forgive me.
I need some time to myself each night when day is done. Sitting in my living room, me without anyone. When child in and child out, hard at childhood play, this time is just the thing I need to start another day. So when I put my child to sleep, and pieces all around, this time is just the thing I need before I lay me down.
But think of it. To endow a college would necessitate the suppression of families altogether, making a fortune and bearing 13 children. No human being could stand it. Moreover, for centuries, to earn money was impossible for women, and had it been possible, the law denied them the right to possess what money they earned. So not a penny could be spared for amenities, for wine and partridges, beadles and turf, books and cigars, libraries and leisure. To raise bare walls out of the bare earth was the utmost they could do.
I was very young when I began to drink. Alcohol was always available and had a miraculous effect on me. I knew a new freedom and a new happiness that was impossible to describe. I felt like a bird that had been let out of a cage to soar among the clouds and sing. Little did I know that alcohol, then other drugs, would later turn on me, requiring more and more to get the same effect. I used alcohol and drugs throughout my high school years and into my college days. I used to get the effect I needed. I used every day by the time I was in college. And somehow I graduated in 4 years with a degree in nursing. I had a real talent for school. Otherwise, I couldn't have managed to achieve what I did while using drugs and alcohol.
The scene, if I may ask you to follow me, was now changed. The leaves were still falling, but in London now, not Oxbridge. For that lunch, and that dinner had started a swarm of questions in my mind. Why did men drink wine and women water? Why was one sex so prosperous and the other so poor? What conditions are necessary for the creation of works of art? 1,000 questions suggested themselves, but one needed answers, not questions, which meant consulting the learned and the unprejudiced. Thus confident and inquiring, I set out in the pursuit of truth. For if truth is not to be found in the library of the British Museum, where is truth? But no sooner had I opened a volume of the catalogue than stupefaction, wonder, bewilderment. Are you aware of how many books are written about women in the course of 1 year? Are you aware of how many are written by men? Do you realize that you are perhaps the most discussed animal in the universe? Here I had come with notebook and pen, proposing to spend the morning reading, supposing that at the end of the morning I should have transferred the truth to my notebook. But I should need claws of steel and beak of brass merely to penetrate the husk of all this. Schoolmasters, sociologists, essayists, novelists, clergymen, men who had taken an MA degree, men who had taken no degree, men who had no apparent qualification save that they were not women, chased my simple and single question, why are women poor, until it became 50 questions, until the 50 questions leapt frantically into midstream and were carried away. I will read you a few of them, explaining that the page was headed simply Women and Poverty, but what followed was something like this. Condition in Middle Ages of, worshipped as goddesses by, weaker in moral sense than, idealism of, greater conscientiousness of, South Sea Islanders, age of puberty among, attractiveness of, offered as sacrifice to, small size of brain of, less hair on the body of, love of children of, weaker muscles of, vanity of, Shakespeare's opinion of, Lord Birkenhead's opinion of, La Bruyere's opinion of, Dr. Johnson's opinion of. Why does Samuel Butler say, wise men never say what they think of women? Wise men never say anything else, apparently.
I suppose my first unpardonable act was to be born into a family that only wanted sons. Perhaps it would be better said my father, who had the authority in the family, only wanted sons. He had no difficulty making known his feelings and disappointment with me, his only daughter. There were 2 older brothers before me, a miscarriage before and after my arrival in this world. My father, a career Marine, often verbalized his philosophy regarding running a family. In order for him to ascend in rank within the Corps, he had to be able to maintain control and order within his own family. He was frequently gone overseas. The majority of the responsibility for giving the appearance of the perfect family when in public fell to my mother. She was an untreated bipolar. Behind closed doors, my youngest brother and I were no strangers to the pain of yardsticks with a metal edge that felt sharp as a razor's edge. We were never allowed to cry without further punishment. So ingrained became our perfect manners of sir and ma'am that I could not shed it as an adult when I felt someone was an authority figure. They were not limited to the yardstick to discipline us. A favorite game my parents had with me was for one of them to hide while the other one whistled a specific set of notes, telling me they were calling the devil to come and get me. The hidden parent would begin pounding on the wall as the devil in another room stating they were coming after me. I was absolutely terrified of the devil and spent many a night awake and too frightened to sleep. My parents never acknowledged it was not real. It seemed real to a child. They did not try this with the boys. They also told horror stories of deaths occurring in military families due to murder. The most graphic was about a father who had returned home late from work one night. He seemed all right to his wife that evening. She thought nothing of it when he got up and walked down the hall. She heard a noise and thought he may have stubbed his toe. She went down the hall to check on him and found he had used an axe and cut off the heads of all of his children while they were in bed asleep. Then he tried to kill her. She was cut badly, but managed to escape to get help. When the military police got there, he had cut his own throat and was standing before them, pulling it open with his two hands. After such stories, this child had more sleepless nights. At no time in our childhood or adolescence were we permitted to talk to anyone outside the family about such feelings, memories, or difficulties without threat of strong retribution.
All that I had retrieved from my morning's work had been the one fact of anger. But when it came to analyzing all these books, there was always an element of heat. They had been written in the red light of emotion and not in the white light of truth. The professors, well, I lumped them together thus, were angry. But why, I asked myself, why were they angry? Possibly when the professor insisted a little too emphatically upon the inferiority of women, he was concerned not with their inferiority, but with his own superiority. Must indeed be one of the chief sources of his power. For women have served all these centuries as mirrors, possessing the magic and delicious power of reflecting the figure of a man at twice its natural size. Take away that power, and very probably the earth would still be swamp and jungle. This explains in part the necessity that women are to men, and it serves to explain how restless they are under her criticism.
Punched in my face. You made me do it this. Stay out too late. He loves me. He will never do it again. It's just got out of hand. Food and money gone. May also lose my home. He loves me. He breaks my arm. Sets off an alarm. He loves me. I try to flee. He even tries to kill me. He loves me now.
Imagine if woman had no existence except in the fiction written by men, one would imagine her to be a person of the utmost importance, very various, heroic and mean, splendid and sordid, infinitely beautiful and hideous in the extreme. So, as great as man, something even greater. Certainly, if we consider it, Cleopatra must have had a way with her. Lady Macbeth, one might suppose, had a will of her own. One might go even further and say that women have burnt like beacons in all the works of all the poets from the beginning of time. But this is woman in fiction. In fact, she was locked up, beaten, and flung about the room. She pervades poetry from cover to cover. She's all but absent from history. She dominates the lives of kings and conquerors in fiction. In fact, she was the slave of any boy whose parents forced a ring upon her finger. Some of the most inspired words in literature, some of the most profound thoughts fall from her lips. In real life, she could hardly read, could scarcely spell, and was the property of her husband.
My youngest brother was brilliant. He was consistently a straight-A student through high school, Then distracted by love, which led to his marriage as soon as he was old enough to leave home, Mother disowned him as she had done with my oldest brother. My youngest brother's crime was deciding to become a husband instead of a doctor. That is the only reason I got to go to college. The only reason I got to finish was because later my parents offered my youngest brother to send him through college, and he declined. He and his wife are still married and have raised 2 wonderful children. My father told me all of this many years later. If my brother had taken my parents up on their offer, my father explained, I would have had to come home. My parents could only afford to send one child to college. Matters at home had a decidedly different track. My mother became an out-of-control, untreated, bipolar, manic stage. Her rage with me was so strong one evening as an adolescent that after my father had given me permission to spend the weekend with my brother, that she screamed, I wish all my kids were dead. I left late at night, looking the wrong way down the barrel of her Saturday night special. My folks' name was big politically in the town where we lived. I knew they would call the police and report me as a runaway if I did not get in contact with law enforcement. Per my instructions, I was sitting in the Chief of Juvenile Probation's office the next morning. After listening to both sides, Mr. Helm tried to explain to my father that my mother needed help. My father immediately negated that and stated he had come to take me home. Mr. Helm refused. My father leaned over his desk and stated, we'll see about that. After my father left, but within an hour, Mr. Helm received some sort of phone call. Shortly afterwards, he came out, apologized to me, and stated he had no choice but to send me home that afternoon. My father returned to the office and took me home.
Here I am, asking why no women wrote poetry in the Elizabethan age, and I do not know how they were educated, whether they were taught to write, if they had sitting rooms of their own, how many women had children before they were 21, what, in short, they did from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. They had no money, evidently. It would have been extremely odd had one of them suddenly written the plays of Shakespeare. And I thought of that old gentleman, a bishop, I believe, who declared that it would be impossible, completely and entirely, for any woman, past, present, or to come, to have the genius of Shakespeare. He wrote to the papers about it. He also told a woman who applied to him for information that cats do not, as a matter of fact, go to heaven, though they have souls of a sort. How much thinking those old gentlemen used to save, how much used to save one. How the borders of ignorance shrank back at their approach. Cats do not go to heaven. Women cannot write the plays of Shakespeare. Nevertheless, I cannot help thinking that the bishop was right, at least in this. It would have been impossible, completely and entirely, for any woman to have written the plays of Shakespeare in the age of Shakespeare. Let me imagine, since there is so little in the history books, what would have happened had Shakespeare had a wonderfully gifted sister, called Judith, shall we say. Shakespeare himself went very probably to the grammar school where he learned Latin and the elements of grammar and logic. He was, it is well known, a wild boy who poached rabbits, perhaps shot a deer, and had rather sooner than he should have done to marry a woman in the neighborhood, who bore him a child rather quicker than was right. That escapade sent him to seek his fortune in London. He had, it seemed, a taste for the theatre. He began by holding horses at the stage door. Very soon he got work in the theatre and became a successful actor, meeting everybody, knowing everybody, practicing his art upon the boards, exercising his wits in the streets, and even getting access to the palace of the Queen. Meanwhile, let us suppose, his extraordinarily gifted sister remained at home. She was as imaginative, as agog to see the world as he was, but she was not sent to school. She had no chance of learning grammar and logic, let alone of reading Latin. Perhaps she picked up a book and read a few pages on the sly, but then her parents came in and told her to mend the stockings or mind the stew and not moon about with books and papers. They would have spoken sharply but kindly, for they were substantial people who knew the conditions of life for a woman and who loved their daughter. Indeed, more likely than not, she was the apple of her father's eye. Perhaps she scribbled a few pages up in an apple loft on the sly, but was careful to hide them or set fire to them. Soon, however, before she was out of her teens, she was to be betrothed to the son of a neighboring wool stapler. She cried out marriage was hateful to her, and for this she was severely beaten by her father. Then he ceased to scold her and begged her instead not to hurt him, not to shame him in this matter of her marriage. He would buy her a fine petticoat or a chain of beads, he said, and there were tears in his eyes. How could she disobey him? How could she break his heart? The force of her gift alone drove her to it. She made up a small parcel of her belongings, let herself down by a rope one summer's night, and took the road to London. She was not yet 17. She had the quickest imagination, a gift like her brother for the tune of words. Like him, she had a taste for the theatre. She stood at the stage door. She wanted to act, she said. Men laughed in her face. The manager, a fat, loose-lipped man, guffawed. He bellowed something about poodles dancing and women acting. No woman could possibly be an actress. He hinted, you can imagine what. She could get no training in her craft. Yet could she even seek her dinner in a tavern or roam the streets at midnight? Yet her gift was for fiction and lusted to feed abundantly upon the lives of men and women and the study of their ways. At last, for she was very young, oddly like the poet Shakespeare with the same grey eyes and rounded brows, at last Nick Green, the actor-manager, took pity on her. She found herself with child by that gentleman, and so who shall measure the heat and violence in a poet's heart when caught and tangled in a woman's body, killed herself one winter's night and lies buried beneath the crossroads where the omnibuses now stop outside the Elephant and Castle. That, more or less, is how the story would run, I think, if any woman in Shakespeare's day had had Shakespeare's genius.
Time to face the world. Time for doubt and second guessing, like I do every day. Hey, you. Hello? Krista, you can't ignore me. Once again, you sit at the crossroads of life and death, the latter being the only option completely correct. Again, you have drifted to the deepest, darkest part of your being, the muffled sounds of the world floating around you. Your heart aches as you watch your family live day to day. I see you trying to hide it from your kids, finding only enough energy to force a fake smile. That must be the most heartbreaking, the worst form of torture. The tears have stopped. A vast emptiness is inside. It is so cold, so dark. You have nothing left to salvage. So, Krista, there you stand, naked, hollow, afraid. You have no more fight left in your battered mind, your broken body. You have become the disappointment others have always predicted. Do you remember me yet? You are the one whose parents forgot about as they mourned the loss of their son. You are the one who opened her legs in exchange for one moment of affection, a piece of love. You are the one who tried to silence the pain with the drugs and the drinking, furious when the loneliness returned. There she is, the girl who never learns. The girl who quietly whispered no, so he took what wasn't his. The girl who cut and cut, but not deep enough, hoping to chase away the sadness, to dull you in. Your scars now a daily reminder of all of the times you failed. So tell me, Krista, are you brave enough to continue? Or can this finally end? The alarm sounds.
But how could genius have been born among women whose work began before they were out of the nursery, who were forced to it by their parents and held to it by all the power of law and custom? Yet genius of a sort must have existed among women, but certainly it never got itself onto paper. When, however, one reads of a witch being ducked, of a woman possessed by devils, of a wise woman selling herbs, or even of a very remarkable man who had a mother, then I think we're on the track of some lost novelist, some mute and inglorious Jane Austen, some Emily Bronte who dashed her brains out upon the moor. Indeed, I would venture to guess that Anonymous, who wrote so many poems without signing them, was often a woman. And it was a woman, I think, who wrote the folk songs and the ballads, crooning them to her children, beguiling her spinning with them, or the length of a winter's night. This may be true, this may be false, who can say? But what is true in it, I think, is that any woman born with a great gift in the 16th century must certainly have gone crazed, shot herself, or ended her days in some lonely cottage outside the village, half witch, half wizard, feared and mocked at.
I've seen, I've watched from the bird's eye. I've dreamed, I flew through the night sky. Rain doesn't feel the same when you're close to the source. But from the ground, the pellets pound, and great is the remorse. To try to fly with wings clipped seems a joke. To stand and defy those who'd have you lose hope may get you bruised. But when you've nothing to lose, you choose to cruise until feathers return in full and you feel freedom once again. Take to the sky. Day or night, you ride high, not in pride, but godliness and contentment. For now, you see, through the pain, you've gained.
One can measure the opposition that was in the air to a woman writing when one finds that even a woman with a great gift for writing brought herself to believe that to write a book was to be ridiculous, even to show oneself mad. But with Mrs. Aphra Behn, we turn a very important corner on the road. Aphra Behn was a middle-class woman with all the plebeian virtues of humor, vitality, and courage. A woman forced by the death of her husband to make her living by her wits. She made, by working very hard, enough to live on. The importance of that fact outweighs anything she actually wrote. for here begins the freedom of the mind. For now that Aphra Behn had done it, middle-class women took to writing. Writing dignifies what is frivolous if unpaid for. And so a change came about which, if I were rewriting history, I should think of greater importance and describe more fully than the Crusades. The middle-class woman began to write. Women everywhere should let flowers fall upon the tomb of Aphra Behn, for it was she who earned them the right to speak their minds. It was she who gave them the courage to say, I refuse to allow you, beadle though you are, to turn me off the grass. Lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no lock, no gate, no bolt that you can set on the freedom of my mind.
I'm like a turtle that sticks her head out to check out her surroundings before coming out. Now, if there's nothing going on, if there's too much going on, I'll go back inside to mine, my peace of mind, to do as I choose, whenever, however, whatever that I choose. Now, look, hear me when I say this. Oh, today I choose joy, 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 deep down in my soul. Now, hear me when I say this. It's been a long time coming. If I had found this beautiful feeling that was inside of me all the time, because of what I know today, I did not know then, stolen a lifetime of peace of mind. Hard work? Nah, not at all. Mine, to do as I choose. Ooh, and if I don't feel like it, I don't have to. I'm understanding that today. Stop, hold up, wait a minute, think. Breathe, and think, and breathe. Which way do I go now? This is what I must ask myself, so that I may stay in tune with my mind and stay out of tune with yours. See, I come from a great dark place, a very gloomy place. Life has not always been great and light for me. Things said and done to me without my permission, not knowing I had the power to be rid of it all. Today, because just knowing it makes me happy. Wow, I love it. It feels great. We must learn what works for us. And when we do, we must make it work. I understand it. I really get it. What you think of me is just that. To do as you please. I can't take it away from you, even if it cuts me like a knife, knock me down, stomp on me, slap me, rape me, drag me, take all the breath out of me. Now what do? It's done. Like it or not, it's done. Where do I go from here? Do I stay? Do I give you me to do as you please? I can remember when that's all I knew. Need to breathe. Very well needed. But I love it. It feels great. Better than anything I've ever felt in my entire life. I never have to revisit these dark memories. Things become dark and light for me. I even noticed my handwriting changed. It really rubs me the wrong way. Those dark memories. But the great thing about it, see, let me say that a little louder. Me, all mine, peace of mind, joy, mine, not yours anymore.
Therefore, I would ask you to write. I would ask you to write all kinds of books, hesitating at no subject, however trivial or however vast. By hook or by crook, I hope you will possess yourselves of money enough to travel and to idle, to contemplate the future and the past of the world, to dream over books, and to let the line of thought dip deep into the stream. For when I ask you to write books, I'm asking you to do what will be for your own good, but also for the good of the world at large. Well, here I would stop, but every speech must end with a conclusion, and a conclusion aimed at women should have something particularly exalting and ennobling about it, shouldn't it? But these exhortations can safely, I think, be left to the other sex, who will put them, and indeed who have put them, with far greater eloquence than I can compass. When I rummage around in my own mind, I find no noble sentiments about being companions and equals and influencing the world to higher ends. I find myself saying, briefly and prosaically, that it is much more important to be oneself than anything else. Do not dream of influencing others, I would say, if I knew how to make it sound exalted. Think of things in themselves.
Another high was that I received my nursing license back unconditionally. I did this through 5 years of working on my suspended license by going to therapeutic meetings, supervised work, taking random drug screens, and attending Alcoholics Anonymous. I am currently disabled, but I've held several very good nursing jobs. One is a nursing professor. I was even at the graduation ceremony where I was able to witness my students receive their diplomas. I also call another high my marriage to a gentleman in Alcoholics Anonymous. We met at the Outer Banks in North Carolina during a recovery weekend and have been married for 12 years. He has been in the program for over 30 years and is a solid supporter of mine through the struggles I've had. Another high of my recovery is that I've had a woman ask me to be godmother to her son. I am proud that my Catholic faith has once again taken a major role in my life. I have become spiritual in my recovery. I use prayer and meditation as daily tools. My manic depressive illness is currently under considerable control with medication and different therapies. Over 3 years ago, my manic depression was not under control, and I came to the Daily Planet for psychotherapy and medication management. I call the Daily Planet my secret gem. Without that encouragement, I would never have had the courage to tell my story. The Daily Planet also provides the guidance for the medication I am currently prescribed. The Daily Planet has been instrumental in managing my manic depressive illness and other problems in my life as they occur. This is another reason why I say I don't live in the past nor wish to shut the door on it.
I was told that I needed to see a psychiatrist. After a while, I took the first step, and I'm glad that I did. After I saw the psychiatrist, I was referred to a therapist. I talked and cried for many days, weeks, and months in my sessions with him, and I learned so much about myself. God put some awesome people in my path to help me. My children, my daughter-in-laws prayed for me, and I'm glad that they did. I had several different types of surgeries in my lifetime, and there was no one to help me. But my God showed me how to do for myself. I used to feel so hurt sometimes because my mother didn't step in again. That was too good to be true. But today, those things don't bother me like they used to. Today, I know the only one to help me was God and my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Enough about how I felt back then. Today, I feel like I'm sitting on top of the world. No one can ever reside in my head ever again. Not a living soul can ever make me feel less than because of the wrong things that I've done in my lifetime. Someone else has done just as bad things as you, maybe even worse.
The dimensionality of the echoing voices of time past through future times and encompass the resonance revealed during the present, but only through embracing the evolving diversity of the illusionary present can the magnitude of these passages be understood. As we must respect in due the glorified beauty of the spirit of freedom and propensity for flight, which is natural and inborn in all creatures appearing earthbound. So must we hold at least equal in admiration the flight of each other. There is no cause to struggle through the mires of departure because a loved one chooses to fly, for you have been in flight with them for some time. The skies do not change, just the inhabitants and direction of the air. If your loved one flies in a new direction to make familiar that which is new, so are you also in flight. Should the routes to your destinations cross again, you will recognize the familiarity of that which is new. Although it may appear more difficult to find each other on cloudy days, it is certain that as we search the skies, we will find each other and be reunited. Clouds are only an illusion, temporarily blocking the realization that we are not in flight separately, but side by side. Thus, departures cease to be times of sorrow, but times of exuberance, recognizing that this is not the loss of one to another, but an invitation to fly together through the clouds of space and time. That kindred spirits reunite in a designated time and place to dream dreams and place foundations to those visions, that they might form a foundation for a more enriched world is the true quest of humanity. 40 years after the writing of the first line of this comes the realization that we may not be talking at all about the reunion of multiple people, but reconciliation of all the hidden, broken, damaged, and lost parts of self that had to be sacrificed during whatever circumstances from the past. The flights may be hope's eternal flame, guiding us back through the portals of hell from which we have resided. We reach out, admiring the spirit of hope and determination to survive.
We started out together a long time ago, and how our lives would end up, neither of us could know. We saw dreams unfolding, some with happy endings. We saw some with dreams pending. We enjoyed building memories, the family that we had. Then came the day for party, which left me very sad. I know I'm going to join you. One day it has to be. Most days I feel with sorrow. I miss you more. Rest, my mother, and meet me on the shore. We will come together, and we'll never part no more.
I've no time to make a me. I'm still trying to find the we that helped build me. You see, when I was weak, I sought community. From judge to judged. All I could do was trudge my way through the streets, step by step, moment to moment. The path seemed unclear, but I continued with tear perpetually in my eye. No time to cry, for fear would have me die. So I speak from the me I see and find that we find each other. Alas, my sister, my brother, let us set aside our labor and choose to savor the sweet pleasure of leisure. Hand me that remote.
Now what do? It's done. Like it or not, it's done. Now where do I go? Do I stay? Do I give you me? To do as I please? I can remember when that's all I knew.
1,000 pens are ready to suggest what you should do and what you should say. My own suggestion is, I admit, a bit fantastic. I prefer, therefore, to put it in the form of fiction. I told you in the course of this talk that Shakespeare had a sister, but do not look for her among the lives of the poets. She died young. Alas, she never wrote a word. Now, it is my belief that this poet, who died young and never wrote a word, still lives. She lives in you and me and many other women who are not here tonight, for they are washing up the dishes and putting the children to bed. But she lives. For great poets do not die. They are continuing presences. They need only the opportunity to walk among us in the flesh. This opportunity, as I think, it is now coming within your power to give her. For it is my belief that if we have rooms of our own and money of our own, if we have the habit of freedom and the courage to say exactly what we think, if we escape a little from the common sitting room and see ourselves not always in relation to one another, but in relation to reality, then the dead poet who was Shakespeare's sister will put on the body which she has so often laid down, drawing her life from the lives of the unknown who were her forerunners. She will be born. I maintain that she will come if we work for her, and that so to work, even in poverty and obscurity, is worthwhile.
Now it's time for me to take my seat, but I will leave you all with these last words. Don't let lies and deception get the best of you. Keep walking tall and keep your head held up high, because you are just as good as the next person, maybe even better. Love and peace be with you all.